Hello, my name is Nicholas Junker, and this is for AEP 803, Me and Action Research. My name is Nicholas Junker. I grew up in a small town called Cuba, Kansas. I lived there for most of my life, and then moved on to Belleville, Kansas, where I went to high school. I went to college with my wife there. On the right in the picture in Lindsborg, Kansas at Bethany College. My wife and I got married in June of 16. About a year later, we got ourselves a little corgi, which is also in the picture. My first teaching job was out at Larned High School. I taught social studies, was the assistant girls tennis coach, assistant girls basketball coach, and head high school softball coach. I spent 2 years there and then went on to graduate school at the University of Kansas for a year. But then I realized that I missed teaching quite a bit. While I was there in graduate school, I was also an elementary PE teacher, but then realized I missed my content. I then moved back close to home and at a little town called Clifton Clyde High School, which is close to where I grew up. Taught there for a year, and then about 3/4 of the way through the year, my mom got stage 4 breast cancer, and the school that she was a librarian at had a job that opened right about the time she was diagnosed, and so a blessing in disguise, and I was able to go there and be with her for the next couple of years until her passing just last October, and so that was a very valuable experience. And Republic County High School is where I'm currently at. I'm currently the social studies teacher. I teach government, world history, current issues, and psychology. I'm also the junior high football coach and the head high school boys basketball coach. My school has a history of strong academic achievement. Kids get bachelor's degrees or leave our school with a pretty significant amount of technical training, whether it's a certificate in a CTE field or driving towards that associate's or bachelor's degree. A very traditional school culture, very old-fashioned. We're trending towards younger staff, though, and I think that's changing towards some more progressive ideas, which I think is positive. We completed a bond construction over the last year and a half, which has been positive, with the new addition of a new auditorium, gymnasium, and some HVAC items that have really dressed us up, and some new classrooms that have been very positive. A couple things I'm involved with in the school right now, especially as it relates to the KISA process, is senior project and seminar improvement. Senior project is our capstone experience that another member of the staff and I have shepherded and adopted as a graduation requirement. It's basically a job capstone where they do a research paper, they pick a career, they carry out a years-long worth project with a mentor in their field, and then they give a presentation at the end of the year talking about what tangible items and things they created through their field. So very positive thing that we're really excited about at Republic County. Also involved in some seminar improvement. Seminars are pretty hot topic around the state, and improving the social emotional health of students. And so I did some revamping of that this summer, with some changing of some mixed groups to some homogenous groups to some heterogeneous groups, kind of mixing and matching and seeing what's most appropriate, making sure our students are involved in planning for their future. And we also have a new superintendent who's really kind of driving forward a lot of those conversations. He's done a great job in the last year and a half, so we're pretty excited to have him. So driving into the content that we're looking at is about action research. So what is action research? From Sillars, I thought he drove some of the best understanding of that. Is, so I paraphrase, is that research that strives to understand occurrences in the learning environment and is carried out by the teacher for their own benefit. Also looking at continuing PD, focusing on one aspect of teaching and learning. It's an ongoing reflective process. And also it's a collective problem-solving cycle. I have a little bit of a graphic there on the top right. The two quotes I thought that really exemplified what action research is are from Kolk and then from Arnold. From Kolk, it says, a practice of reflective inquiry undertaken with the goal of improving understanding and practice. And then from Arnold, action research is a methodology, is a framework for approaching a piece of research. So delving into the purpose of action research, the purpose is to explore, understand, and improve our practice as teachers and educators. It's to improve teaching and teacher interventions. It's also about improved professional development. And then it's also continuous improvement of interventions, framework, and structures. And then from STEM learning, it's action research pushes reflection on practice. And so the generalized purpose of understanding is evaluating our own strategies and our methodologies and pedagogy in this space and trying to get it better and make it better, so to improve outcomes. So the four main types of action research that I found from Sillars is technical, practical, emancipatory, and participatory. Technical is facilitator driven, typically by subject matter experts in their field. In our scenario in the classroom, it would be teacher driven. What's outside, and I'll talk about traditional versus action. It's about personal participation, and we're looking to validate and refine specific theories. In practical, the researcher and the practitioner are engaged in the research. It is hinges on personal judgment. One of the things that Sillars focused on this was very flexible. It's about the values, the interpretation, the understanding of the researcher and practitioner engaged in the process, which makes it authentic for the researcher, driving their knowledge towards a goal that is important to them. The third one is emancipatory, which I find unique and engaging. It's about tying together the real-world problem and the theory. And that's something I think in classrooms and in school districts across the country, sometimes we don't do a good job of doing. A lot of times it's theory and then it's practice, and sometimes we don't marry the two together, and I think that's what's a positive thing about emancipatory. It's also about motivating action and interaction. I think in the classroom, we can drive research through our understanding of pedagogy and improve student outcomes. And then also understanding that it's about a group intervention, driving this research. It's about everybody being an active participant in the research, not just a researcher hypothesizing and then watching from the sidelines. It's about each individual participating in that process. And then we finally have participatory. This one focused a lot on social change. The goal is social change. The goal is improving social situation and improving rationality and justice. I think about this a lot of times. When we talk at Republic County, we talk a lot about closing the gap. I know a lot of schools talk about that as well. It's about improving the situation for all students and learners, irregardless of where they come from or what their current situation is. And I think providing that area of research can really drive your school forward. So goal of action research, I thought, first came from a quote from Kolk, is that it helps answer questions you have about the effectiveness of specific instructional strategies, performance of specific students, and classroom management techniques. It also provides a framework and methodology for approaching a piece of research from a variety of perspectives involving complex situations. So the goal is make your teachers better, which inherently makes your students better. You're evaluating your pedagogy, your methods, your structures, your understanding of how you teach, how you educate your students, and then completing that along a cyclical process to improve yourself over and over and over again. So the four main steps that are kind of mixed together from a couple of the resources that we had from Spencer, Kolk, and Sillars. First is planning and problem identification. The focus was on this was one of the most important aspects of action research, is that you have to start with inquiry. You have to know and build a testable question, and that question has to be a part of your understanding of your content, your pedagogy, and have an overall goal. They always say begin with the end in mind, and that's an important process. Also, kind of take a look at some literature reviews, being able to understand what pedagogy is out there, being able to understand what methods are out there for your process is vital. And then you head on to step 2, which is action planning. How am I going to carry out this? And so I'm carrying out this experiment over and over and over again. How can I build and analyze and develop? And the way I do that is I collect data from that action plan, whether it's qualitative, whether it's like discussing the processes, the understanding of it, or whether it's quantitative things like an informal or formal assessment, where you can build that and understand that data. The third is through you're observing what happens and you're collecting that data. So important here is to paint a picture. I think that to be able to truly make authentic progress in a data-driven way is you have to be able to collect and analyze your data and build a picture of your data so that way you can really inform your future decisions, whether that's in a chart or a graph or whatever way in which you develop and understand the trends in your data is wholly appropriate. And then finally is analyzing data, reflecting, and coming to a conclusion. We have to evaluate what we did. We have to look at the data. How did our pedagogy or the changes we made in our pedagogy or those interventions did they make a difference or did it not make a difference? We have to form conclusions based on that data, based on those interventions, and then reflecting on that strategy. And the graphic I think here is important is throughout all of these sources that we have, it talks about once you have done this, do it again. Do it again, do it again. Wash, rinse, repeat. Make sure that you are planning out, finding a problem. What's the problem? Taking care of your action, observing, and then analyzing over and over and over again. It's a cyclical process driving you towards to be a better teacher, for your school to be a better school, and to drive your knowledge forward. So looking at the difference between action research and traditional research, action research is best described in Cilliers as the empowerment of participants. I think that throughout action research, it really drives the understanding of students and teachers throughout the process, which is definitely different from traditional research, as traditional research really has a theoretical detachment, is you sometimes separate what's actually going on with the theory, which is not like action research, which has the participant and the researcher and the person engaged in that theory, which is important. We also have collaboration through participation. The teacher and the students are part of the process, not some researcher who is detached from the scenario or the situation. It's about teachers and students being participants or in a partnership of the process. It's also about acquisition of knowledge in your field, in your classroom, and in the area in which that you are carrying out the research. You drive the question, you drive the intervention, you drive the solution, and you drive the analysis, and that's an important piece. And then kind of how traditional research differs from that is there's not always a right or wrong in that area. And so in traditional research, we do find it's black, it's white. This intervention worked, this intervention didn't. In traditional research, it's also large scale. So we don't focus on individual strategies like you would in action research. We focus on a whole school interventions, or we focus on large scale programs instead of did this reading strategy impact or affect students, as you would in action research. And then the difference, one of the major differences I find between action research and traditional research is action research is biased. It cannot be unbiased. It is the researcher carrying out, participating, and driving that, as opposed to traditional research, which is unbiased and you're not necessarily directly involved in the collection or the process of the data that you're building. So I kind of hit on that a little bit, and then so this is kind of develops where the common problems are. I found that from Halai. He talked about there are multivariate challenges as we talk about when we talk about action research. He talked about the social settings are complex, so that it is not possible to control the variables or the outcomes. Schools and classrooms are a place in which you have so many things going on all at one time, so many different variables, that it's impossible to really conduct a traditional research at the classroom level. And so that's why it can be a significant problem driving forward basic strategies or pedagogy in that methodology. It's also, and that because of that, it's hard to identify direct impact. I talked about how do we know if our intervention was the reason for improvement, or how do we know if it wasn't prior curriculum or a parent intervention or a tutor intervention? And so those are things that we have to consider. It's also never fully objective, as I mentioned before, that in this we are part of the process. And so we're building this intervention, we saw this problem, and we are definitely biased in this fact. It's also very small scale. So the way in which you're carrying out action research is either at the individual teacher level, the collaborative level, or at the school-wide level. And so typically most of it occurs whether it's in a grade level grouping or it could be in a content level group, but it typically doesn't address wholesale significant program systemic changes, and that's why it's typically small scale. Also, and it's also in its inapplicability to those greater systemic problems. It's evaluation of teaching practice, applying action framework. It provides framework for constant reflection, which I think is something that's important to my practice. I think it's constantly being able to reflect, solve problems, build inquiry is a positive thing for teachers and students as well. It also provides opportunities for collaboration. I think that we, as teachers, sometimes stay in our own foxhole or island teach, and I think something that this option, especially when you talk about the collaboration action research approach, definitely can provide that opportunity to grow your craft and to improve your student outcomes overall. Also, at times it allows you to focus on one specific element. There are times as teachers where we are having 100 different million things. As I mentioned at my beginning of my video, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm married. I have a lot of different things that I'm engaged in at the school level as well as a personal level. And so with all that noise, sometimes we don't focus on something one specific, and this framework allows you to focus on a specific action, a specific thing, and to be able to continually evaluate and assess and then build specific strategies that you can to drive your learning as a teacher and make this as a relevant PD, as Cilliers talked about. And to build, instead of sometimes things that maybe are not applicable or appropriate to you, this is specific to your classroom, your learning, your needs, and your students' needs. So looking at action research, defending it, and why it's appropriate and it improves student learning, but also teacher performance. I yanked out a couple of quotes which I thought were important from some of the research. So in specific regards to student learning, Boss talked about that students consider authentic assessment more engaging, with increased opportunities to be creative, make choices, and collaborative. In my classroom, I know this is definitely paramount. Providing them with those engaging choices allows them to, one, improve their learning, two, take stake in their learning, but three, and finally, to also just improve and drive a greater understanding of the content. And then when we looked at from Halai, it specifically focused on that it had dramatic improvement, significant improvement in school attendance and regularity of students coming to school. And we know as teachers and future administrators that the more kids are at school, the better off their achievement's going to be. It also specifically hinted on that the results showed a marked improvement in student performance. And so by evaluating that context, by evaluating the understanding through action research, it's vital. And then students begin to participate more. I talked about in the first bullet there, when students have choice, students participate and are engaged more, they learn more, and they're more active in their classrooms, which is very positive. In regards to teacher performance, I've talked about this for quite a bit. Teachers are thinking more critically about creating assessments that allow for differentiation that are applicable to students' everyday lives. I think that the more that you can provide students the opportunities to understand and build an understanding around content that is applicable to them, they're much more likely to get engaged. And that's also building your teachers' abilities as well. And action research promises progress and professionalization. As teachers, I can't remember which resource it talked about. Specifically, it wasn't the Calhoun one that I'm citing here, but another source discussed the idea that each teacher can become, they're either an expert teacher, or then they can become an exemplary teacher. And so there's a difference in that facet, and I think action research can really drive you to being an exemplary teacher. And then Calhoun again begins to talk about it. Action research can revitalize the entire learning community as well as aid teachers in changing and reflecting on their practices. And a hugely important cog to action research is that reflection on your strategies, reflection on your actions, driving your student learning. So here's some of my personal, professional used thoughts, misgivings on action research. Prior to this, my exposure had been limited to maybe one or two academic articles. I didn't really have a lot of experience. I've traditionally been at small schools, who have not undertaken this. I don't know if this is a small school, big school option, but watching through some of the videos, providing comments to some other classmates through their big schools, they have such as Blue Valley and some of the larger schools that they have been engaged in. They have done this, and I don't know if that's a small school, big school thing, but that's something that I have not done. So now some other thoughts here, looking at it is, as a small school, we wear a lot of hats. You know, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, I'm a sponsor of some clubs, I'm involved in the senior project and the seminar improvement that I talked about at the beginning. It's a challenge, and then also to build in scheduling that allows for collaboration and problem solving is hard, and it's a significant challenge. And I think one of the things that I think about a lot, and I think a couple of the resources have talked about this, it definitely exists in an informal way, especially in a small school, maybe not throughout the defined cyclical process as a lot of the resources dictated, but I think that it can be done, and it does happen. One of the things I really like about it, though, is it's a partnership between students and teachers, and I think that is wholly appropriate. And I think that as an educator, as I've grown in my 5 or 6 years of teaching, I think that each piece and parcel of why I get better is because I engage students more. And then finally, reflecting on it a little bit is schools, as Halai talked about, are complex social situations, and so it's a really significant challenge to be able to dial down where specifically your methods or interventions are making an impact. But it's possible, and it can happen, and as long as you engage your participants and can find the time to do so, it's wholly applicable. So looking at school and personal action research, I again reflect on the small school challenges. I think that a lot of small schools don't really or haven't ever done action research just because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I have 5 different preps that I teach. And so being able to boil down the methodologies, I only have 1 or 2 courses in which I have multiple times throughout the day. So being able to differentiate and provide a authentic collection of data and intervention can be a significant challenge. You can also look at traditional PD, and that's something that I think that I have done. I really focus on going to conferences, my own personal growth, reaching out to other professionals. In a small school setting, that's what you have. We only have 1 or 1.5 to 2 social studies teachers. That's just where it's at, and I think that we do and we can build structures into it, but I think as I focused on before, the scheduling piece and finding time to collaborate and problem solve is a significant challenge. So looking at some of the standards that were research supporting the educational success and well-being of each student and adult, when you look at CLO 1.2, the thing about action research that supports that standard is the methodology and framework for continual improvement. As I mentioned quite a bit before, it's about cyclical reflection. And so as you go through that process of inquiry and action and observing and analysis, it definitely focuses on that specific standard. The next standard, CLO 4.1, is supported through action research and this assignment because it allows you to focus on specific challenges for your curriculum or school. An important focal point of action research is you driving the initial inquiry of a problem or situation or intervention that you think is necessary for your growth, and that's awesome. The next one is CLO 4.2, and I think the way that this correlates to this standard action research is it builds a partnership between the practitioner and the learner. Being able to have the teacher and the students be able to blend together their understanding of content and their understanding of methods is wholly appropriate. And also, the goal of that is to improve methodology. And so whenever you improve methodology, whether it's in your curriculum or whether it's in your message, you're going to improve your outcomes for all learners. And looking at the CLO 4.3, that correlates or answers to that question of the well-being of each student and adult, is a process designed to meet the needs of the entire set of classroom community. You're focusing on a variety of learners in your classroom, and when you're providing those interventions, that improves overall your standards in your classroom. And also there builds reflections on both quantitative and qualitative data. I think one of the strengths and interesting aspects about action research is it focuses a lot on the process and the intervention, but it still needs to make sure that you have a bit of a focus on quantitative data. And then the final standard that it touched upon, and I think action research touched upon and supports, is that it's that cyclical structure of improvement. I think as long as you continue along that process, and I'll hash it out again, of inquiry, action planning, observing, analysis, building of your data, and then continually understanding that this is a process that we continually need to engage in, grow, and develop. And that develops that stronger pedagogy. And if you can share that and collaborate with your staff, whether in your content area, at your content area, or grade level, I think that's very, very important. So finally, finishing up here with a course learning outcome, the correlation to the course learning outcome for the assignment was demonstrated. Correlation to the assignment by providing research surrounding a framework for teacher improvement, resulting in student growth. The action research framework also correlates to the evaluation of curricula and pedagogy, resulting in adaptation and appropriate change. Looking at why it's relevant. This assignment was relevant to my learning through providing research for improving my current craft of teaching, along with providing a structure to assist teachers whilst in an administrative role. And then this assignment brought action research to the forefront of my attention, as I have not encountered this conceptual framework in a formal way prior to this assignment. And then brief reflection is, as a result of the assignment, I will look to build more collaboration, professional development time into input action research in all fields. I truly believe that if the scheduling and resources allow, action research can be a game changer. By engaging in a cyclical, data-driven improvement process, teachers, schools, and communities can dramatically improve the outcomes for all students. And here are my resources. Thank you for watching my video.